Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sam's Tarot. This time we're going to do a flip through of the Thoth deck, as well as talk about a little bit of how the Golden Dawn influenced modern tarot. So, a lot of my resources actually come back from the book right back here. Let's see if I can do it. There we go, right there. The Encyclopedia of Tarot, Volume 1. It also comes through just years of experience and a little bit of history here and there regarding the tarot. So let's get started. Just generally do a flip through here. Thoth deck, as many of you probably already know, was the artwork was from Frida Harris, and based off of the symbology and accountability that Aleister Crowley put in. Aleister Crowley was a member of the Golden Dawn, and of course, after his time with them, started up the OTO, Ordo Temple Orientis. There we go. Which was another secret society, much like the Golden Dawn. So to kind of back up a little bit, to kind of give you a 10,000 mile view of the history of the tarot. And first off, I should let you know I am not an expert at this about the history. I will even tell you up front, I may end up giving you not on purpose, but I may end up giving you some bad information. So if you see that and know that, please by all means comment down below. Just know that it wasn't done on purpose or maliciously or anything like that. So the tarot gets credit for starting up in Egypt from a lot of sources. And the reason why is there was a book called the Book of Thoth that had supposedly had 78 plates in it. Now, I am aware that the actual book does exist. It is, actually, I'm not sure where it is right now, but it is supposedly in a museum somewhere. I'm not sure if it shows and has a complete 78 pages in it. Therefore, I don't know if it was fully 78 pages or not. But that's kind of the mystical start of all this. Not just with the Thoth deck, but tarot in general. Now, I am a firm believer that I do believe that a book exists. However, I don't believe that all 78 cards were, or 78 plates were done. It probably wasn't even much of that. But we do know that some, and I do believe that archetypical images were part of that. So fast forward into the Renaissance age, and then the mysticism of Roscarian orders, etc. You have this kind of convergence of Egyptian mythology and Roscarian Renaissance stuff going on. If you hear the dog barking, you'll have to apologize. I have a pack of 5 dogs. They're all the small yapper dogs, and getting them to hush for too long at once is almost an impossible task. So you just have to forgive that they're going to bark in the background a little bit. Anyway, a lot of people put the start of the tarot as the modern deck that we see, based off of games such as Tarotchi and the Middle Ages, and then the Marseille's deck. Now, what's interesting about this is most of the card games that we associate with Tarotchi and into the Tarot actually didn't start in France, but actually started in Italy. Matter of fact, you may have heard of a deck called the what's the name of that deck? The Visconti, and I always blow this next name, Visconti Scorza deck. That actually predates the Marseille's deck and predates many of the different Visconti decks. By the way, in the book right there, actually has a fascinating several pages of the heraldry and the family history of the Visconti family. Um, and it's actually amusing because it actually reads kind of like a cross between The Godfather and any soap opera you've ever seen out there. I mean, it's just wow. The Viscontis, let's just put it this way, were not the nicest people around, okay? Uh, and especially if you kind of consider the Middle Ages, they were, well, they were rich. And we all know that the landowners from those times, why there was exceptions to this rule, were pretty much, rich, nose in the air. They owned it, and everybody else could live in their filth. Well, the Viscontis were no different. But anyway, not to disparage their name too much, because the Visconti family for generations were into the Tarot and into the Tarocchi. And actually, I don't want to call it the Tarot back then, it was just a Tarocchi back then. A lot of what we know about Italian Tarot actually comes from this family. So we can't, slam on them too hard because, they are kind of our forebearers in this Tarot lifestyle, if you want to call it that. But anyway, one of the Visconti decks, of course, actually probably several end up going up into France, and in France made the Marseille's deck. And the Marseille's deck, which we now also call the Pip decks, gave birth to what we now call as the Pip decks. So this was all, the Pip decks aspect was all in the 1600s, I want to say. Give or take 100 years, excuse me. So we're going to fast forward now up to Elias Levi. Man, it's hell when you've done your best to remember some of the names and then totally forget them. So you'll just have to. I apologize and forgive me. But one of the old occultists actually got started back on Tarot, and from him, there's almost a direct line from that man, who I'm totally blanking, Elias, Levi. I know Levi's in there somewhere in his name, but anyway, you can do a kind of a mentoree, etc. down the line until you get to people in Roscarian order that included Arthur Waite. Now, Arthur Waite, as many people are familiar with, is who helped do the Rider-Waite Smith decks, RWS. With S being Smith, that was Pamela Smith, if I remember right, who did the artwork on the RWS decks. And there we have kind of the second incarnation of Tarot. The first being the Marseille's Pip decks. And then now we have the second one, the Rider-Waite Smith deck, which really took off. Now, there is some talk about how the Golden Dawn had their own Tarot, and obviously there are decks out there such as the Self-Initiatory Tarot deck of the Golden Dawn, the Golden Dawn Tarot, the Hermetic Tarot as inspired by the Golden Dawn, etc. So, but even if you really look at a lot of those decks, a lot of them still have either a Rider-Waite Smith or a Thoth deck, which we'll get more in a minute, combination. So they don't kind of stand on their own. Now, while the Rider-Waite Smith deck became arguably one of the most popular Tarot styles that anybody has ever seen, Aleister Crowley had some disagreements. Now, I am not a Thoth scholar or an Aleister Crowley scholar, though I did remember reading when I was younger his autobiography and being somewhat disappointed to find out how much he was into mountaineering, because I swear half that autobiography was just about mountaineering. Personally, I never had anything to do with it. But anyway, that was just a little sidebar, I guess. But the one thing he did do was create his own tarot deck, which was eventually published. And I want to say the first time it got published was around 1947. I'm sure somebody who's watching is going to know a lot more than I do about the Thoth deck and the history of the Thoth deck. By all means, please go ahead and comment below. And if you're a fellow YouTuber and have your own channel where you discuss this, by all means, please leave your link there. I freely give you permission. And speaking of video links and for other YouTubers and stuff, let me just kind of have another sidebar here and just make sure that you get to know my information that I share with you in this channel, whether it's a book review, a deck flip through, talking to you casually like I am about like the history of tarot. This is all information that's for you and free. And I want it to be a free flow of information. So if you have something to add to any of my videos, I'm not going to be offended by you putting in a comment or adding in a link to your own video. Please, I more than accept and welcome you to do so. So anyway, back to Frida Harris and Aleister Crowley doing the Thoth deck. So the Thoth deck was created, and its popularity over the last few decades have come to the point that it has created the, for lack of a better word, the third arm of the tarot decks as we know them, which would be the Marseille's deck, which is considered your old antique decks. And that's a whole different topic, because back in the old days like that, you had a lot of tarot decks that did not go as exactly 78 cards. Matter of fact, you've got decks out there. I got one that I'll share down the line that was 56 cards, for example. And that was the Michele Aruda deck. And then other decks, I think it was the Egyptian deck had 96 cards. Don't quote me on that. I know I get my decks mixed up all the time. You'll learn about that. By the way, I don't really drink beer. This is just cheap store brand soda. So if you ever see me drinking, I'm really not drinking. So anyway, when I don't know if I told you this in my last video or not, but I started reading the tarot when I was young, real young, and then took a break probably for about a decade and a half, even though during that decade and a half I usually had a deck. That deck was the Thoth deck. And the main reason why is the first deck I ever bonded with was the Thoth. First deck I ever had was a Rider-Waite-Smith, just normal edition. I couldn't tell you what edition. This was back in 83, 84, and it was a used US Games box. So, yeah, good luck finding that one. I know I don't have it anymore, unfortunately. But shortly after that, and learning more about how to read the tarot and what the cards were, I got my first couple decks. And one of them was the Robin Wood deck, I think. Robin Wildwood deck. Maybe it was just a Wildwood deck. Had gone through a couple editions by now. Which at the time when I had it back then, I didn't really care for it, to be honest. And I wasn't really into collecting tarot when I was that young. So I ended up looking for a different deck, and then I found the Mythic Tarot. I was probably somewhere between 17 and 19 when I found that one, and I really liked that one because, you know, I really love Greek mythology and the Greek symbolism and how the Mythic Tarot tied in things that we know about the Tarot and the Fool's Journey and tied that into Greek mythology. It was awesomely done. And then right around the same time, though, I also discovered the Thoth deck. And my first Thoth deck was a used Thoth deck, and it was in a white box AGM. And as you will learn as a theme for me, I eventually gifted that to another reader. Partly the reason is back in that time, which we're talking now, late 80s, there was a certain, and some people still believe this to this day, where one had to be gifted their tarot for it to have any significance. So buying a tarot, that's how most people got their first tarot deck. At the end of the day, this concept of being gifted a tarot was such a huge myth and part of the environment that I was involved in anyway, back in that day. So I ended up gifting that box to a fellow student of the craft, and I end up getting the blue box. And all these, of course, had the 3 magesses, which was awesome. And then I go away for several years, and that blue box, actually, I don't know where it's at. Actually, one of my frustrating moments when I decided I was going to start collecting and reading the cards again and all that was, hey, I need to dig out my Thoth deck. And I could not find it. It is probably still in a box in the garage after a move. I'm hoping to eventually come through it. But in the meantime, I did go ahead and go out and buy the other deck. In fact, you'll probably recognize it. It's the good old-fashioned green box. Yay. And one of the things that I had a hard time dealing with was that there was only 1 mages. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a Thoth deck. The Thoth deck has 3 mages, as everybody knows this, rah, rah, rah. And it took me a couple months to find out what happened. And apparently what I learned was that Los Scarabeo and US Games were being sued by the OTO, because the OTO never gave permission for the game systems to use the copyright images. Probably, I'm assuming, because of financing between corporation and nonprofit organization like the OTO. At least I think the OTO is nonprofit, I would assume so. Obviously took time to get to the point where they can afford to do big lawsuits and all that stuff with the corporate. But apparently they won. And there was a hiatus of Thoth decks for the longest time. Then, apparently, a lawsuit was finally settled after appeals, etc., where they could do the Thoth deck, but they could not do the 3 mages. They can only do 1. Now, I suspect the reason for that, and I don't know for sure, but I suspect the reason is because at this point, copyright laws, etc., I'm assuming that these were already in production at so many other places in times other things without being challenged, that really the only thing they can do is try to protect the artwork. And the 3 magesses offer an artwork, 3 different artworks, as you know. I wish I had one of my old decks so I can show the other 2 mages. The first mages, by the way, for this deck, you saw it earlier. Let me see if I can pull it back out real quick, since we were talking about this so much. Anyway, that's what I suspect kind of happened on that type of front. Now, what I'm excited about is that we're finally starting to see new Thoth decks come out. Not just inspired by, but actually new. Right now on Amazon, from what I've seen, you've got the golden, the golden Thoth deck, which is the Thoth deck, a little bit recolored. Same imagery, same artwork, and then gold leaf on the edges. And that one is high on my list to get. And then another deck, Thoth deck, that has been announced has been the Millennia Tarot, which the best way, just from what I'm seeing on pictures online and stuff, is kind of like how the Universal deck uses a lot of the symbology of Rider-Waite-Smith, just in a slightly different context. That's what the Millennium Tarot does to the Thoth deck. So I'm actually looking forward to getting my hands on that deck as well. This is the Magus that comes with the decks now, but there are 2 different Magus cards that was available. Excuse me, gas. With the older decks through Los Gabriel and AGM and actually, yeah, US Games, because that's where this one comes from. Wasn't it? From through US Games? Yes, through the US Game Systems. So anyway, there are some other decks out there that follow Thoth symbology. One of them I have now. It's called the Night Sun deck. I haven't really studied too much into it. I don't even know if I just made a true statement. My understanding is that it is Thoth inspired. And there's a couple other decks out there which are also inspired by the Thoth deck. So there we go. That's my whole spiel, a little bit about the history and how the Golden Dawn inspired a lot of what we know in modern tarot. Through Arthur C. Waite and Pamela Smith, through the Rider-Waite-Smith. And even though it wasn't developed until the OTO days, Order of Temple Orientis days, Aleister Crowley and Frida Harris were both, actually I'm not sure if they were both or not. I know Aleister Crowley was part of the Golden Dawn as well. So if you have stuck with me through all this so far, I appreciate your patience, and I hope you learned something and enjoyed it. And I would welcome you to go ahead and hit that thumbs up button down below. If you're interested in seeing further videos from me, please subscribe. If you do subscribe, make sure you hit that little bell icon. That way you will be notified when new videos come up. My next video is probably going to be another deck walkthrough. But which deck at this point, I don't know. I'm going to make it a surprise. So, and just for people who are curious, at this point in my life and restarting up my collection, I actually only have 18 decks at this point, and books, but the way I buy, it should be content for a while. Anyway, the dogs are starting to bark again and all that good stuff, so I'm going to go check on them. And thank you again for your time. Again, please feel free to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button down below for the like. Much appreciated. And until next time, have a great day. Goodbye.